6 days. That's all that stood between me and the bonus I'd bled for, sacrificed weekends for, missed family dinners for. $72,000 that would finally pay for my sister's tuition, my father's medical bills, and maybe, just maybe, let me breathe for the first time in years. But instead of a deposit slip, I got 5 words that froze my blood. We no longer need you. They thought I'd go quietly, another casualty of corporate greed. They forgot to check the fine print in my contract. They forgot one tiny detail that would bury them. My name is Madeline Cross, and at 38, I'd built my entire life around being indispensable. As head of strategy at Vortex Dynamics, a mid-sized software company in Boston's financial district, I'd transformed their chaotic product roadmap into a machine that printed money. For 5 years, I'd been the one they called when deals went sideways, when competitors drew blood, when the board needed answers yesterday. The morning of March 15th started like any other. I arrived at our glass tower at 7 a.m., coffee in hand, already mentally preparing for the quarterly review. My phone buzzed with the usual flood of emails, Slack messages, and meeting requests. 6 more days until the quarterly bonuses hit. 6 more days until I could finally exhale. I'd already done the math 1,000 times. After taxes, that $72,000 would cover Emma's first year at Northeastern, pay off Dad's remaining chemo bills, and leave enough for me to take my first real vacation in 3 years. Maybe somewhere with a beach where my phone wouldn't work. At 9:47 a.m., Graham Wolf's assistant asked me to stop by his office. Graham, my direct supervisor and the kind of executive who wore baseball caps with his Armani suits because he thought it made him relatable, sat behind his oversized desk, fidgeting with a Mont Blanc pen he never actually used for writing. "Madeline, have a seat," he said, his voice coded in that synthetic concern they must teach in MBA programs. Behind him, through floor-to-ceiling windows, Boston Harbor sparkled mockingly in the spring sun. The head of HR, Patricia something or other, sat in the corner like a vulture in Ann Taylor. That's when I knew, you don't need HR for good news. "I'll cut to the chase," Graham said, though he'd never cut to any chase in his life without a PowerPoint deck. "We're restructuring. The board has decided to consolidate strategic operations under the product team. Your position has been eliminated, effective immediately." The words hit me like ice water, but my face stayed neutral, a skill I'd perfected in countless hostile negotiations. 6 days before quarterly bonuses, I asked, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Graham shifted uncomfortably. "Unfortunate timing, I know, but these decisions come from above." Above? As if the gods of capitalism had descended to personally screw me over. "We've prepared a severance package, 2 weeks' pay, continuation of health benefits through the month, 2 weeks, after 5 years of 60-hour weeks, of saving their asses from bankruptcy twice, of building the strategies that tripled their valuation. 2 weeks. Patricia slid a folder across the coffee table. "We'll need you to sign this separation agreement. It includes a standard non-disparagement clause and confirms the termination of all compensation arrangements, including pending bonuses." I stared at the folder but didn't touch it. My mind was already racing, sifting through memories, contracts, conversations. There was something from my early days here, when Vortex was just 40 people in a converted warehouse. When the founder, Marcus Chen, before he sold out to private equity and retired to Napa, actually cared about his employees. "I'll need time to review this," I said. "Of course," Graham replied, already checking his phone. "But we'll need your badge and laptop now. Security will escort you to collect your personal items." 20 minutes later, I stood on Federal Street with a cardboard box of desk plants and picture frames, watching my former life through revolving doors I could no longer enter. Commuters streamed past, oblivious to the professional execution that had just taken place 20 floors above. But as I walked to my car, one thought kept circling back. The original employment contract from 2016, the one I'd negotiated myself, back when I was young and paranoid enough to plan for betrayal. back when I'd slipped in a little insurance policy that nobody had bothered to read. Graham Wolfe had been at McKinsey in 2016, probably billing some Fortune 500 company $500 an hour to state the obvious. He'd never seen my original contract. Neither had Patricia from HR, who'd joined just last year. They thought they'd played this perfectly, terminated me right before the bonus payout, avoided a massive expense, probably already dividing my $72,000 among themselves. But they'd forgotten to check the fine print. They'd forgotten about Article 12, Section C, and that was going to cost them everything. The contract was exactly where I'd left it, locked in the fireproof safe in my home office, tucked between my passport and Dad's war medals. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled out the cream-colored folder marked Vortex Dynamics 2016. The paper felt heavier than I remembered, weighted with possibility. I spread the 23 pages across my desk, scanning for the section I'd fought so hard to include all those years ago. Back then, I was just a senior strategist, but I'd learned from my previous job at a startup that had imploded overnight, leaving employees with nothing. Marcus Reed, Vortex's founder, had been different, or at least pretended to be. He'd actually listened when I'd pushed for employee protections during contract negotiations. There it was. Page 18. Article 12, Section C, buried in the miscellaneous provisions where no one ever looked. In the event of termination without documented cause or without prior written warning as specified in Section 8, the employee shall be entitled to compensation equal to 18% of the company's net quarterly profits for the quarter in which termination occurs, payable within 30 days of separation. I read it 3 times, my heart rate accelerating with each pass. The language was clear, unambiguous, no documented cause, check. Graham had said it himself. Restructuring, not performance. No prior written warning, absolutely check. Not a single email, no performance improvement plan, nothing. But the real beauty was in the numbers. 18% of net quarterly profits. When I'd negotiated this in 2016, Vortex was barely profitable, maybe clearing $200,000 a quarter. That 18% would have been $36,000. Decent, but not life-changing. Now? I pulled up Vortex's public financial statements on my laptop. As a subsidiary of a publicly traded private equity firm, they had to disclose quarterly performance. Last quarter, $3.2 million net profit. This quarter was tracking even higher, probably close to $4 million based on the deals I'd personally closed in February. 18% of $4 million was $720,000. $720,000. I had to sit down, then stand up, then sit down again. The clause had been Marcus's idea. Actually, his way of protecting early employees who took below-market salaries for equity that might never materialize. If they fire you without cause, he'd said, signing the contract with his favorite fountain pen, they should pay for it. The board had approved it without question because back then, 18% of almost nothing was still almost nothing. But Marcus was gone now. Bought out 2 years ago for enough money to retire at 52. The private equity vultures who'd taken over had probably never even reviewed the original employment contracts. Why would they? Graham certainly hadn't. He'd been too busy playing corporate politics, too confident in his ability to eliminate threats to his bonus pool. I found the signature page, Marcus Reed's flowing signature at the bottom, the corporate seal, the date stamp, April 3rd, 2016, still legally binding. I'd made sure of that when I'd refused 3 contract updates over the years, claiming I was happy with my original terms. HR had shrugged it off. After all, my base salary had increased through amendments, and that's all they cared about. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Logan Pierce answered on the second ring. Madeline Cross. His voice was warm but professional. It's been, 2 years since the Morrison acquisition. Logan, I need your help. Are you still practicing employment law? Until they pry my bar license from my cold, dead hands. What's going on? I gave him the summary. Fired that morning. 6 days before bonus. No cause given, no warnings, just restructuring. I could hear him shifting into lawyer mode, his voice sharpening. Typical corporate bullshit. They think they can. Logan, I interrupted. I have an Article 12C. Silence. Then, you have a what? Termination without cause clause. 18% of quarterly net profits. Jesus Christ, Madeline. How much are we talking about? About $700,000. This time the silence was longer. Send me the contract. Send me everything. Don't sign anything they gave you. And Madeline, start documenting everything you remember about this morning. Every word Graham said, every person present, every detail. We're going to nail these bastards to the wall. I hung up and stared at the contract again. Graham Wolf thought he was so clever, timing my termination to maximize his own bonus. Patricia from HR probably got a nice kickback for processing the paperwork so efficiently. They'd already forgotten about me, I was sure, just another line item eliminated from the budget. But they'd forgotten one small detail. One tiny clause on page 18. And now I was going to teach them why you should always, always read the fine print. Logan Pierce's office hadn't changed much in 2 years. Still the same corner suite in a converted brownstone on Beacon Street. Still the same wall of law books that nobody read anymore. Still the same photograph of him shaking hands with Ruth Bader Ginsburg at some legal conference. What had changed was the gray threading through his temples and the reading glasses perched on his nose as he studied my contract. This is beautiful, he said finally, setting the document down with something approaching reverence. Absolutely beautiful. They have no idea this exists, do they? Graham wasn't here in 2016, neither was the current HR head. The founder who signed this sold out 2 years ago. Logan leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled. At 55, he'd built his reputation on being the lawyer executives called when employees fought back. Except he'd switched sides 10 years ago after his own firm screwed him on partnership. Now he was the nightmare they warned about in boardrooms. First things first, he said, pulling out a legal pad. We need to establish the lack of cause and absence of warnings. Tell me about your performance reviews. Excellent ratings across the board. I have copies at home, always kept my own records. My last review was in December, 4 months ago. Graham called me instrumental to Vortex's continued growth. Any disciplinary actions, written warnings, even informal emails expressing concern? Nothing. Actually, Graham sent me a congratulations email just last week when I closed the Morrison renewal. Said I'd saved the quarter. Logan's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Perfect. Now, here's our strategy. We don't go to HR, they're Graham's people. We go straight to the board and the company's outside counsel. Private equity firms care about 2 things, returns and avoiding litigation that could spoil an exit. We're going to threaten both. He pulled up Vortex's corporate structure on his computer. The PE firm that owns them, Bridgewater Capital. They're positioning Vortex for sale within the next 18 months. Any lawsuit, especially one involving executive misconduct and contract violations, would require disclosure to potential buyers. That's leverage. How do we prove they knew about the termination timing, the bonus issue? We don't have to. The clause doesn't mention bonuses, it's about termination without cause, period. But, Logan paused, studying me. You mentioned Graham probably allocated your bonus to himself. Any way to prove that? I thought about Sophie Lang, my friend in accounting. Sophie who'd been passed over for promotion 3 times while watching Graham bring in his old McKinsey buddies. Sophie who handled the quarterly bonus calculations and had access to all the allocation spreadsheets. I might have a source, I said carefully. Someone in accounting who could provide documentation. If you can get evidence of bonus reallocation, that transforms this from a contract dispute into potential fraud. That's criminal territory. And PE firms really hate criminal investigations. My phone buzzed. Sophie, as if summoned by my thoughts. Heard about this morning. That's fucked up. Coffee? I showed Logan the text. That's my source. Be careful. He warned. Document everything, but don't ask her to do anything that could get her fired. We need clean evidence. An hour later, I met Sophie at a Starbucks in Cambridge, far from Vortex's financial district territory. She looked tired, angry, and somehow unsurprised. I knew something was coming, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. Graham had me pull your bonus calculation last week. Said he needed to review the allocation methodology. Sophie, I need to ask you something. But only if it won't put you at risk. Stop. She pulled out her phone, showed me photos she'd already taken. I document everything those assholes do. It's my insurance policy. The first image was a spreadsheet dated March 10th, 5 days ago. My name was there. $72,000 allocated for Q1 performance. The second image, dated March 16th, today, showed the same spreadsheet with my line deleted and 3 new entries. Graham Wolf, $40,000. Jennifer Martinez, his latest McKinsey import, $20,000. Brad Thompson, another Graham loyalist, $12,000. He sent me an email telling me to update it as the final version and backdate it to March 1st. Sophie continued. I forwarded it to my personal email before he could recall it. Sophie, this could get him fired. Good. Do you know how many people he screwed over? You're just the latest. She leaned forward. I've been documenting his bullshit for 2 years. Expense report fraud, hiring kickbacks from his McKinsey buddies, the whole thing. I was waiting for the right moment. Looks like you're it. I texted Logan. Have evidence of bonus reallocation. Email trail included. His response was immediate. Game changer. Sending demand letter tonight. They have 48 hours to respond before we file suit. Sophie raised her coffee cup. To Graham Wolf, who's about to learn why you don't fuck with the people who know where the bodies are buried. I clinked my cup against hers, thinking about Graham sitting in his office, probably already spending my bonus in his head. He had no idea what was coming. The contract he'd never bothered to read. The clause he'd never known existed. The evidence he'd created himself through sheer arrogance. 48 hours. That's all the time he had left to enjoy his victory. Sophie's evidence was even more damning than I'd hoped. Back in my apartment, we spread everything across my dining room table like detectives assembling a case. She'd brought a USB drive that might as well have been a smoking gun. This is the original bonus allocation from February, she explained, pulling up a spreadsheet on my laptop. Graham approved it himself. See his digital signature. Your $72,000 is right there, tagged as Q1 2024 Performance Bonus, M, Cross. She clicked to another file. This is the revised version from this morning. After you were terminated, he didn't just delete your entry. Look at the metadata. The file properties showed modification history. Graham Wolf, March 16th, 9:15 a.m. 32 minutes before he called me into his office. He reallocated your bonus before he even fired you, Sophie said. That's premeditation. But the crown jewel was the email trail. Graham had been sloppy, probably high on his own power play. The email to Sophie read, Per our discussion, please update the Q1 bonus sheet to reflect recent organizational changes. Backdate the file to March 1st for consistency with our planning timeline. Final version attached. Per our discussion, I repeated. He's creating a paper trail for a conversation that never happened. Oh, it gets better, Sophie said, her smile sharp. I checked the audit logs. He tried to access the system on March 1st to actually backdate things, but he doesn't have those permissions. Only senior accounting does. So he had to ask me to do it today and pretend it was always that way. Logan arrived 20 minutes later, having driven over after I'd sent him the preliminary evidence. He reviewed everything with the intensity of a prosecutor preparing for trial, occasionally muttering unbelievable or idiotic under his breath. This transforms everything, he said finally. We're not just talking about breach of contract anymore. This is fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and potentially embezzlement. The bonus money was already allocated to you. Reallocating it after termination without cause is theft. He pulled out his laptop and began drafting in real time. We're going nuclear. demand letter to the board of directors, copy to Bridgewater Capital's managing partners, and courtesy copy to Vortex's outside counsel at Patterson Thornfield. I watched him type, his fingers flying across the keyboard with 30 years of practiced rage against corporate malfeasance. We're demanding full payment under Article 12C, that's $720,000 based on projected Q1 profits, plus the original $72,000 bonus that was fraudulently reallocated, plus punitive damages for the fraudulent conduct, plus attorney's fees. How much total? I'm asking for $1.2 million. They'll negotiate down, but with this evidence, we'll get most of it. Sophie's phone buzzed. She checked it and laughed. Graham just sent an all-hands email about exciting organizational changes and how my role is being expanded to include strategic financial planning. He's trying to buy my silence. Don't respond, Logan warned. In fact, forward it to your personal email and then don't touch anything else at work. You're now a potential witness. He turned back to his laptop, adding paragraphs about witness tampering and obstruction. Madeline, I need you to understand something. Once I send this, there's no going back. They'll either fold immediately or go full scorched earth. Based on this evidence, I think they'll fold. But Graham might get desperate. Send it, I said without hesitation. Logan hit send at 8:47 p.m. The demand letter went to 14 recipients, every board member, 3 managing partners at Bridgewater, and the senior partners at Patterson Thornfield, who handled Vortex's legal affairs. 9 minutes later, Logan's phone rang. He put it on speaker. Logan, it's David Patterson. I'm looking at your demand letter regarding Miss Cross. David. Logan's voice was professionally cheerful. Working late on a Monday. Your letter just woke up half my partners and all of Bridgewater's leadership team. What the hell is this about fraud and embezzlement? It's about your client terminating my client without cause, violating a binding contract clause, and then fraudulently reallocating her earned bonus to the very executive who fired her. We have documentation, David, emails, spreadsheets, audit trails. Your boy Graham Wolf left fingerprints everywhere. Silence on the other end. Then, we need to meet. Tomorrow morning. Happy to meet, but the clock's ticking. Every day this drags out is another day my client suffers damages and another day closer to this becoming public. You know how Bridgewater feels about portfolio companies making headlines for fraud. Logan, come on. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., your offices. Bring Graham Wolf and anyone from Bridgewater who cares about their investment. And David? Tell Graham to start practicing his explanation for why he reallocated a bonus 32 minutes before firing the person who earned it. Logan hung up and turned to us. They're panicking. Patterson Thornfield bills Vortex probably $2 million a year. Bridgewater has 3 other portfolio companies that use them. Nobody wants this getting ugly. Sophie stood to leave. I should get home. Big day tomorrow pretending I don't know anything. After she left, Logan packed up his materials. Get some rest. Tomorrow they'll either offer a settlement or declare war. Based on that phone call, I'm betting on settlement. The evidence is too damaging, and the potential criminal exposure is too high. I walked him to the door. Logan, why does it feel like we already won? He smiled. Because we have. They just don't know it yet. Graham Wolf thought he was playing checkers, moving pieces around a board. But you were playing chess, and you made this move 6 years ago when you negotiated that clause. Alone in my apartment, I stared at the Boston skyline, thinking about Graham in his oversized office, probably getting screaming calls from board members and PE partners. He'd thought he was so clever, timing my termination to steal my bonus. But he'd forgotten to check the fine print. And now the fine print was about to destroy him. The counterattack came at 7 a.m., 2 hours before our scheduled meeting. Logan called me, his voice tight with controlled fury. They're playing dirty. Check your email. I opened my laptop to find a message from Patricia in HR, sent to me and CC'd to what looked like half the company's legal team. Attached were 2 documents I'd never seen before. A performance improvement plan, dated January 15th, and a written warning for insubordination, dated February 22nd. Both had my electronic signature at the bottom. Those are forgeries, I said immediately. I never saw these documents, never signed them. Obviously. But they're trying to establish cause retroactively. Amateur hour. Really? Forward them to me immediately and don't respond. I studied the documents closer. The PIP criticized my failure to align with leadership vision and resistance to strategic pivots. Corporate speak for nothing. The warning cited a supposed incident where I'd been inappropriately challenging to Graham in a meeting. Logan, that February 22nd date, I was in Miami that entire week at the Enterprise Software Summit. I have receipts, registration records, photos with timestamps. Perfect. What about January 15th? I pulled up my calendar. That was a Tuesday. I was in back-to-back client meetings from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. The signature timestamp on this fake PIP shows 2:30 p.m., right when I was presenting to Morrison Industries with 12 witnesses. They're getting desperate. This is good, actually. Creating fraudulent documents is a felony. By 8:30, Logan and I were in the elevator at Patterson Thornfield's offices, rising to the 42nd floor. Logan had brought his associate, a sharp young woman named Dana, who specialized in forensic document analysis. The conference room was a testament to corporate panic. David Patterson sat at the head of the table, flanked by two junior partners. Graham Wolfe sat to his left, his usual smugness replaced with barely concealed fear. Patricia from HR was there, nervously clicking a pen. And on the video screen, 3 faces from Bridgewater Capital, including someone I recognized as Sarah Kim, the managing partner who'd led Vortex's acquisition. Let's cut through the bullshit, Logan began before anyone could speak. You sent us fraudulent documents this morning. We can prove they're fake. And when we do, Graham and whoever helped him create them are looking at criminal charges. David Patterson raised a hand. That's a serious accusation. Dana. Logan nodded to his associate. Dana pulled out her laptop. The documents you sent have metadata showing they were created yesterday, March 17th, at 11:47 p.m. and 11:52 p.m. Both were created on a computer registered to Graham Wolfe. The DocuSign signatures were applied using Mr. Wolfe's administrative override access, which logs show he accessed for the first time ever last night. Graham's face went pale. Dana continued. Furthermore, the signature image doesn't match any of Ms. Cross's authentic signatures in the system. It appears to be a copy-paste from a different document, scaled up 15%, which is why the pixelation is inconsistent. Sarah Kim's voice crackled through the speaker. Graham, is this true? There must be some misunderstanding. Stop. Sarah's voice could have frozen fire. Mr. Patterson, we need 5 minutes. The video went dark. David Patterson looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Graham started to speak, but David shut him down with a look that could have peeled paint. When the video resumed, Sarah Kim looked directly at Graham. Mr. Wolfe, you're terminated immediately for cause. Security will escort you out. Patricia, you're suspended pending investigation. David, Bridgewater wants this resolved today. Graham stood up, his face cycling through rage, fear, and disbelief. You can't just leave. Now. Sarah's tone brooked no argument. As Graham was escorted out, I felt no satisfaction, just a cold sense of justice. He'd tried to destroy my career for $72,000. Now his was over. Sarah continued. Ms. Cross, Mr. Pierce. Bridgewater apologizes for this situation. We've reviewed the original contract Article 12C. We're prepared to honor it in full, $720,000 based on Q1 profits. Additionally, we'll restore the original $72,000 bonus and add $100,000 for the inconvenience and reputational damage. That's $892,000, Logan said. We asked for $1.2 million PC. The alternative is litigation that helps no one. David Patterson interjected. Criminal charges against Graham don't benefit Ms. Cross, and a lawsuit would delay payment by months. Logan looked at me. I thought about dragging this out, about the satisfaction of watching them squirm in court. But I also thought about Emma's tuition deadline, Dad's medical bills, and the fact that $892,000 was already more than I'd dreamed of when this started. One condition, I said. Sophie Lang gets promoted to Senior Director of Finance, reporting directly to the CFO with a 40% raise. Sarah Kim actually smiled. Done. She's already helped us identify several other irregularities in Graham's dealings. We need people like her. Logan drew up the settlement agreement on the spot. Clean separation, no non-disparagement clause on my side, though they couldn't say anything negative about me. Full payment within 5 business days, and a neutral reference stating I'd left to pursue other opportunities. As I signed, Sarah Kim added, Ms. Cross, if you're interested, Bridgewater has portfolio companies that could use someone with your strategic expertise and attention to detail. I'll think about it, I said, meaning it. But first, I had some time off to take. Walking out of that building. Logan shook his head in amazement. In 30 years of practice, I've never seen anyone shoot themselves in the foot quite that spectacularly. Forging documents after being caught stealing, Graham must have been desperate. He was arrogant, I corrected. He thought the rules didn't apply to him. He thought a contract from 2016 wouldn't matter in 2024. He thought no one would check the metadata. He thought wrong. My phone buzzed. Sophie. Graham just got perp walked out. There are actual tears. Also, Sarah Kim just called me directly about a promotion. What did you do? I texted back. I remembered to read the fine print. The story wasn't supposed to go public. That was never part of the plan. But Graham Wolfe, in his infinite capacity for self-destruction, couldn't let it end quietly. 3 days after the settlement, while I was booking flights for a long overdue vacation to Santorini, Logan called, You need to see this. Graham had posted a lengthy rant on LinkedIn, claiming he'd been pushed out by corporate politics and warning about dishonest employees who manipulate outdated contracts. He didn't name me directly, the settlement prevented that, but anyone at Vortex would know exactly who he meant. He's violating the spirit of the agreement, Logan said. We could go after him, but honestly, he's just making himself look worse. That might have been the end of it, except Rachel Voss saw the post. Rachel was a financial journalist at the Boston Business Journal who'd been investigating a pattern of pre-bonus terminations across the tech sector. Sophie had mentioned her to me once. They'd gone to college together. Rachel called me that afternoon. Madeline Cross, I'm working on a story about executives who fire employees right before bonuses vest. Graham Wolfe's LinkedIn meltdown caught my attention, and Sophie Lang suggested I call you? I hesitated. The settlement didn't include a non-disclosure agreement about the facts, only about the settlement amount itself. What exactly are you investigating? A pattern. 17 companies in the Boston area have fired senior employees within 10 days of quarterly bonuses over the past 2 years. In 12 cases, the executive who did the firing received a bonus increase within the same quarter. It's systematic wage theft, but usually the employees don't have recourse. And if they did have recourse, say, a contract clause protecting them? Rachel's interest sharpened. That would be the story. One person fighting back and winning could inspire others to check their own contracts, demand better protections. Would you be willing to talk on background? I thought about all the other Madeline Crosses out there, blindsided days before their bonuses, told it was restructuring or redundancy, while their bosses counted stolen money. On background, not for attribution. The conversation lasted 2 hours. I walked her through everything, the timing, the forged documents, the metadata that exposed them. I couldn't discuss specific settlement amounts, but I could confirm that Article 12C had been enforced. The forged documents are what gets me, Rachel said. That's criminal behavior. Did you file charges? No, I got what I needed. But he's still out there. What's to stop him from doing this again at another company? It was a good point. Graham's LinkedIn profile already showed him as seeking new executive opportunities. Some other company would hire him, impressed by his McKinsey pedigree and smooth talk, never knowing what he'd done. Send me his LinkedIn post, Rachel said. If he's publicly discussing his termination, that opens doors for me to investigate. Public statements are fair game. The article published a week later. Rachel had done her homework, pulling public records, interviewing employment lawyers, and even getting quotes from 3 other executives who'd mysteriously left Vortex under Graham's leadership. She'd found a pattern of Graham hiring his former colleagues at inflated salaries, then terminating existing employees to make room in the budget. The headline read, "The $72,000 Mistake." How one Boston executive's bonus grab backfired spectacularly. She couldn't name me, but she didn't need to. The details were specific enough. A strategy executive fired 6 days before a $72,000 bonus. An obscure contract clause from 2016 forged performance documents created after termination. And a settlement that sources described as substantially more than the stolen bonus. The article went viral in Boston tech circles. By noon, it had been shared over 3,000 times. Graham Wolf's name was trending on local Twitter, none of it flattering. Logan called, laughing. Graham just deleted his LinkedIn profile entirely. Patterson Thornfield dropped him as a personal client. And get this, 3 other former Vortex employees have reached out to me about their own suspicious terminations. Sophie texted me screenshots from the company Slack. Employees were openly discussing the article, sharing their own Graham horror stories. Someone had found his attempt to expense a $40,000 golf club membership as client entertainment. While another person revealed he'd tried to fire a pregnant employee 2 weeks before her maternity leave would vest. Sarah Kim from Bridgewater called me personally. "Ms. Cross, I wanted you to know that we've initiated a full audit of Vortex's employment practices. We've also updated our portfolio company guidelines to require board approval for any termination within 30 days of bonus vesting." "That's good to hear. We're calling it the cross clause internally. Your situation has become a case study for our other companies on what not to do." That evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the Boston sunset, my phone rang. Unknown number. "You ruined me." Graham's voice was slurred, drunk or desperate, maybe both. "No one will hire me. My wife is leaving. You destroyed everything over money." "Graham," I said calmly, "I didn't forge documents. I didn't steal anyone's bonus. I didn't lie. All I did was remember a contract clause you should have known about. You destroyed yourself. I'll sue you for defamation." "With what money? And on what grounds? Everything in that article is true, and you know it. You posted publicly about your termination. You opened that door." He hung up. It was the last time I ever heard from him. A week later, I was sitting in a beach chair in Santorini, watching the sun set over the caldera. My phone was off. My family's bills were paid. Emma had cried when I'd told her about the tuition money. Dad could get the experimental treatment his insurance wouldn't cover. The waiter brought me another glass of wine. "You look like someone who won something," he said in accented English. I smiled. I did. I won by reading the fine print. The return from Santorini meant facing reality, and the negotiation that would determine everything. Logan had set it up perfectly. A private conference room at the Ritz-Carlton, neutral ground that screamed serious business. I arrived 15 minutes early, wearing my best power suit, the same one I'd worn when I'd closed the Morrison deal. Logan was already there, arranging documents with military precision. "They're scared," he said without preamble. "Sarah Kim has been personally overseeing this. Bridgewater's other portfolio companies are watching. If this goes badly, it could trigger a domino effect." At exactly 10 a.m., they filed in. David Patterson with 2 senior associates. Sarah Kim in person rather than on video. And surprisingly, Jonathan Reeves, Bridgewater's senior managing partner. The fact that Reeves had flown in from New York told me everything about how seriously they were taking this. "Let's be direct," Reeves began, his silver hair and expensive suit giving him an air of authority. "The article has created complications. 3 shareholder groups have asked for explanations. We need this resolved completely and finally. Logan slid our demand across the table. The original ask stands $720,000 for the Article 12C violation, $72,000 for the stolen bonus, plus damages and legal fees. Total, $1.2 million. The forged documents changed the calculus. David Patterson interjected. That's potential criminal fraud. If Ms. Cross wanted to press charges, we're not interested in a criminal case, I said, speaking for the first time. We want fair compensation and systemic change. Sarah Kim leaned forward. What kind of systemic change? I'd thought about this carefully. First, an independent audit of all terminations in the past 3 years where bonuses were reallocated. Second, a company-wide policy requiring board approval for any termination within 30 days of bonus vesting. Third, Sophie Lang's promotion to CFO within 6 months. Sophie Lang to CFO. Patterson looked stunned. That's a significant jump from senior director. She identified and documented systematic fraud. She deserves it. And frankly, you need someone in that role who understands where the bodies are buried. Reeves and Kim exchanged glances. Kim nodded slightly. We can agree to the audit and the policy change, Reeves said. Sophie Lang will be promoted to deputy CFO immediately, with a path to CFO in 12 months if performance metrics are met. As for the monetary settlement, he pulled out his own folder. We're prepared to offer $950,000, inclusive of all damages and fees. Additionally, a letter of recommendation from the board, and introductions to any Bridgewater portfolio companies where you might want to work. Logan started to object, but I touched his arm. I knew we could push for the full $1.2 million. Probably get it. But there was something more valuable on the table. I want one more thing, I said. Graham Wolf's bonus, the $40,000 he took from my allocation, goes to a fund for employees who've been wrongfully terminated. Sophie administers it. Reeves actually smiled. You're thinking beyond yourself. I respect that. Done. Then we have a deal. The paperwork took 3 hours. By the end, we had not just a settlement, but a comprehensive agreement that would protect future employees. The audit provision was particularly strong. Any similar violations found would result in automatic compensation to affected employees. As we were signing, Sarah Kim pulled me aside. You know, we really could use someone like you at Bridgewater. Someone who sees the angles others miss. I'll think about it, I said, and meant it. But first, I had other plans. That evening, Logan and I celebrated at his favorite bar, a quiet place where Boston's legal elite went to drink whiskey and trade war stories. You know what the beautiful part is? Logan said, raising his glass. It wasn't just the contract clause. It was that Graham couldn't help himself. The greed, the forged documents, the public rant. He gave us everything we needed. He thought he was untouchable. I agreed. They always do. So what's next for you? I'd been thinking about that. The settlement would be in my account within 5 business days. After taxes, I'd have enough to pay off family debts, invest smartly, and still have a cushion. But more importantly, I'd proven something. I'm thinking about starting a consulting firm, I said, helping employees understand their contracts, negotiate better terms, protect themselves. How many people out there have Article 12Cs they don't even know about? Logan grinned. You want to be the corporate world's worst nightmare. No, I corrected. I want to be their conscience. Graham Wolf thought he could steal from me because he assumed I was powerless. How many other Grahams are out there, right now, planning the same thing? My phone buzzed. Sophie. Emergency board meeting just ended. They're implementing the cross clause immediately. Also, guess who's your new deputy CFO? Drinks tomorrow to celebrate? I showed Logan the text. He laughed. You didn't just win, Madeline. You changed the game. Outside, Boston glittered in the darkness. Somewhere out there, in gleaming towers just like vortexes, other executives were planning their own pre-bonus terminations. But maybe, just maybe, they'd think twice now. Maybe they'd remember the story of the executive who tried to steal $72,000 and lost everything. Maybe they'd remember to read the fine print. The wire transfer hit my account at 9:03 a.m. on a Tuesday. $950,000. I stared at the number on my phone for a full minute, letting it sink in. 6 weeks ago, I'd been counting on a $72,000 bonus to keep my family afloat. Now I had nearly $1 million and a story that had become legend in Boston's corporate circles. The signing ceremony was deliberately anticlimactic, just me, Logan, and a notary in a small conference room at Logan's office. No fanfare, no photographers, no Graham Wolfe to glare at across the table. He'd already become a ghost. His name scrubbed from Vortex's website, his office cleaned out and reassigned to Sophie. "That's it," Logan said as I signed the final page. "You've officially won." But it didn't feel like winning, exactly. It felt like justice. That afternoon, I met Sophie at our usual Starbucks, but this time she was the one buying. Her deputy CFO badge gleamed on her laptop bag. "I found something you should see," she said, pulling up her phone. Graham's been interviewing at smaller firms, using a fake reference from a shell company. Someone tipped off every place he applied to. Word is he's moving to Arizona to work for his brother-in-law's real estate firm. "Good," I said, and meant it. Let him start over somewhere else. Maybe he'll learn something. Sophie studied me. "You're really not angry?" I was angry, but anger doesn't deposit $950,000 in your bank account. Preparation does, documentation does, reading the fine print does. 2 days later, I stood in my father's hospital room as his doctor explained the experimental treatment options now available to us. Dad held my hand, tears in his eyes, not from pain, but from relief. Emma sat in the corner, having driven up from Northeastern, where her first semester was fully paid for. "How?" Dad asked. "How did you manage this?" "I remembered something you taught me when I was 12, I said. "You were reviewing a contract for the house, and you made me read every line with you. You said, 'Maddie, the devil's in the details, but so are the angels.' Turns out you were right." The following Monday, I filed the paperwork for Cross Contract Consulting, LLC. My first client came through Logan, a software engineer who'd been terminated 2 weeks before his equity vested. We found a clause, similar to mine, that his company had forgotten existed. Settlement, $340,000, word spread. Within a month, I had 12 clients. All employees who'd been screwed over by executives who thought contracts were just paper. My favorite case was a janitor at a biotech firm who'd been fired one day before his pension vested after 20 years. We found a verbal contract clause, witnessed and documented, that cost the company $2.8 million. 3 months after my termination from Vortex, Rachel Voss called again. "I'm doing a follow-up story. The cross clause has been adopted by 43 companies in Massachusetts. You've started something." "It wasn't just me," I said. "It was Graham's greed, Sophie's courage, Logan's expertise. It was a perfect storm of corporate arrogance meeting documented evidence. Still, you're the one who kept that contract. You're the one who remembered Article 12C. That evening, I got an unexpected call. Jonathan Reeves from Bridgewater. "Ms. Cross, I have a proposition. We're creating a new position across all our portfolio companies, Chief Compliance and Ethics Officer. Someone to review employment practices, ensure contract compliance, and prevent situations like yours from arising. The position would oversee 23 companies, report directly to me, and carry a 7-figure salary. Interested?" I thought about it for exactly 10 seconds. "Yes." "Excellent. There's one condition. Graham Wolfe can never know this position was created because of him. His ego couldn't handle being the cautionary tale that reformed an entire private equity firm." "Agreed," I said, smiling at the irony. 6 months later, I stood in front of 200 executives at Bridgewater's annual portfolio summit. My presentation was titled, "The True Cost of Clever: Why Contract Violations Destroy Companies." Slide 1 was simple. March 16th, 2024. One executive tried to steal $72,000. It cost his company $950,000, his job, his reputation, and triggered industry-wide reform. The room was silent. That executive thought he was clever, I continued. He thought timing a termination 6 days before a bonus would save his company money. He forgot that employment contracts aren't suggestions. They're binding legal documents. He forgot that employees who've been wronged don't always go quietly. And most importantly, he forgot to read Article 12, Section C. In the back row, Sarah Kim smiled and nodded. Every single one of you has employees with contracts. Some of those contracts are old, drafted when your companies were smaller, more idealistic. Those contracts contain promises you may have forgotten. But your employees haven't. Respect those promises, or one day you'll find yourself on the wrong end of an Article 12C. The applause was subdued but genuine. They weren't clapping for the speech, they were acknowledging the truth of it. After the presentation, a young executive approached me. Ms. Cross. That was terrifying and brilliant. One question, do you ever feel bad for Graham Wolfe? I thought about Graham, probably selling condos in Phoenix, his Ivy League dreams crushed by his own greed. No, I said simply. Graham had choices. He chose to fire me 6 days before my bonus. He chose to steal my money. He chose to forge documents. He chose to lie. Every step of the way. He had the opportunity to do the right thing. He chose not to. And you chose to fight back. No, I corrected. I chose to read my contract in 2016. Everything else was just following through. As I walked out of that conference room, my phone buzzed with a text from Logan. New client, similar situation to yours. You free this afternoon? I smiled and typed back, always free to help someone find their Article 12C. Because here's the truth Graham Wolfe never understood. In corporate America, the house doesn't always win. Sometimes, the person who reads the fine print does. Sometimes, the employee who keeps their contracts, documents everything, and refuses to go quietly comes out on top. And sometimes, just sometimes, trying to steal $72,000 costs you everything. They thought I'd disappear quietly into corporate obscurity. They forgot one small detail. I always read the fine print. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below, and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate justice, please subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'm curious, have you ever found yourself in a situation where reading the fine print saved you? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments. Your stories inspire mine.